Good morning. Morning Musings by Melinda. First musing of the new year. Happy New Year to all of you. I had asked you to give me some ideas for musings, and we got so many fantastic ideas, and we're going to put them all together, and I am going to address each and every one of your ideas in the next coming weeks as soon as I get it kind of organized and see what I'm doing. For the musing today, I thought it important to maybe reflect about 2020 since it was such a difficult year. Many of you know that I practice spirituality for everyday living. I believe in common sense spirituality, and I believe that the truth always has a thread of common sense in it. So as I review the year, I thought I would address not only the pandemic, but also maybe the presidency and also Black Lives Matter. And it's okay if we disagree. I just wanted to throw some common sense out there and talk about it just a little bit. So bear with me. Because I actually believe that we all need to honor the idea that we have abiding light within us, God-given light, and that we each have a responsibility to ignite the light in each other and to pass it on. Wayne Dyer said, "See the light in others and pass it on to others and treat them as if it is all that you see." And unfortunately, during this pandemic and during 2020, we have lost sight of the light and how to treat each other. We have been blinded by our differences and been in a verbal, visceral hysteria. And it's time for us to kind of knock it off because we've got to start this year coming together in some form or fashion that makes some sense and start using some common sense spirituality. I teach something that's called a karmic profile. Your karmic profile tells you who you are at a soul level by looking at the patterns of your life and how they were integrated through your subconscious mind and into your upbringing, and why you attract repetitive patterns to you over and over that may not be patterns that you are in understanding of how you got stuck there. And so that's what I do when I'm working with hypnosis and spiritual life coaching, is to teach people what their karmic patterns are. And some of those karmic patterns come from generational information and through the DNA and so on. And in the same way, through our collective consciousness as human beings, we have historical patterns. We have a history that repeats itself. So Sidney J. Harris said it the best. History repeats itself, but in such a cunning disguise that we never detect the resemblance until the damage is done. And I think that is what the pandemic is. It's history repeating itself, and we have forgotten that. And so when we were all kids, at least in my generation, we played Ring Around the Rosies. Remember that? Ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Do you know that that came from the bubonic plague in 1665? And the rosy red or purplish color around the face was the first sign of having the plague. And then a pocket full of posies was the people in medieval times thinking if they put posies in their pockets that they would ward off the bubonic plague. It was a superstition. Not only that, but having a pocket full of posies, they could smell the flowers because there was death reeking in the air. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down means that most people died from the bubonic plague and were cremated. And so this kind of has stuck in our collective consciousness factor for all these centuries. And so, the pandemics that have happened throughout history are history repeating itself. And I thought that you might understand it from that viewpoint, because you played Ring Around the Rosies, that it's made an indelible mark in our collective consciousness. Now, the first plague was in 165 AD, and that was called the Antonine Plague. 250 AD was the Cyprian Plague. In 541 AD was the Justinian Plague, and half the population died in that plague, by the way. In the 11th century, leprosy started to become an issue. In 1350 AD, the Black Death, and that killed 1/3 of the world's population. In 1492 and 1665, the bubonic plague, the one that we're most familiar with from Ring Around the Rosies. 1817 was the first cholera pandemic. 1855, the third plague pandemic. 1871, the measles pandemic. 1889, the Russian flu. 1918, the Spanish flu. 1957, the Asian flu, 1981, HIV/AIDS, 2003, SARS, and 2019, COVID-19. Gosh, I don't think Bill Gates was there in any of these things. I don't think that Bill Gates or Donald Trump or the Chinese or anybody else was creating these plagues in a lab. I think it's part of our history, that it's part of our karmic profile as human beings, and that we are supposed to be learning how to respond in a different way. The only disease that has been eradicated through a vaccination is smallpox, by the way, and George Washington actually secretly inoculated his soldiers at Valley Forge, but first he quarantined them. So, quarantines and vaccinations are not a form of controlling people and making people sheeple. It's a form of trying to eradicate something that we need to have eradicated, because COVID is sneaky. Now, you guys know that I am a proponent of masks, and masks have actually saved my ass on more than one occasion, because I've had people in my office that have said to me a couple of days later, I didn't know I was positive when I was in there. And knock on wood, I was great. I did not catch the COVID from that, okay? This idea that an inoculation or a vaccination is some kind of a connection to the mark of the beast or the end times also makes me laugh. If you're afraid of a microchip, then kind of throw out your telephone and throw out your computer because anybody can find out what you're doing through your telephone and your computer. Don't you realize that? So we need to kind of listen to the science of the day, because God gives us scientists for a reason. And, I think maybe, just maybe, that, those fine scientific minds that God has provided for us may help us through a vaccination. In fact, I was one of the lucky ones. I got my vaccination last week because I'm a healthcare worker, right? And, if my RNA changes my DNA, I hope it's to get rid of the fat cells. I'll tell you, though, COVID entered my home, and it entered it through my son, who picked it up from somebody that he's associated with, and knock on wood, he's been doing great. But because Bill and I were vaccinated, we called right away Maricopa County. They said we were 52% immune to it at that point in time. And that if we did get it, we would get it very lightly. We did not, and we feel just great. And so I hope that the vaccination will become available for everyone very soon. And of course, I know that it's being rolled out in such a manner that there's some confusion and so on. But that's kind of the norm for trying to figure out some of these things. So I get a big kick out of the people who get Botox and face fillers and lip fillers and boob jobs and use HCG to lose weight, etc., that say, I don't want anything foreign in my body. Think about that. I just get such a kick out of that. It just blows my mind. Okay, so let me move on to politics. What I do want you to understand, though, is in the light, we've got to stop all the conspiracy theories and the nonsense and the silliness, and honor the light between us and move forward and embrace what we have available to us, to respect each other in such a manner, to live by the golden rule, so that we are not in a continuous state of malarkey. And malarkey isn't just Biden's word. I've been using it for years, by the way. It's an Irish thing. Okay, let's talk about the Kennedys and the Trumps, because you know what? I said to myself, the Trumps and the Kennedys have a lot in common. One is loved by the liberals and the other is loathed. But Kennedy had major affairs. He lied about his medical issues. He may have had mafia ties. He had questionable foreign policy issues, and it included a near nuclear disaster with Cuba. But yet he is regarded by 74% of the population as an outstanding president. I was 10 years old when he was assassinated. We were all taught to love Kennedy, but the fortunes of the Kennedys and the fortunes of the Trump families were made in a similarly disreputable way. Trump is also known for his misogyny, his lies, and his questionable foreign policy decisions. And they both practiced nepotism, where they hired family members and friends, and they both had beautiful and long-suffering wives. Do you get the point here? This is history repeating itself, but just in a different way. I myself am a social liberal and a fiscal conservative. I couldn't be more in the middle. I'm middle in the middle, but my political party happens to be common sense. So, lastly, Robin, I'm sorry you're fighting COVID-19. Lastly, I would like to address Black Lives Matter. Oh, I'm being very courageous. The first musing of the year. At least give me points for courage. Okay, now, as far as Black Lives Matter, if your response is that all lives matter, or that cops' lives matter, then you plain do not understand the message of Black Lives Matter. Of course all lives matter. That's not what Black Lives Matter is saying. Of course all lives matter. And of course the police need to be supported. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. You know, that they certainly don't want those things in their midst, but there are bad people in every profession, But you know, Black Lives Matter may have some radicals in their group, and that may be what you're focused on. But have you ever seen radical Christians? How about David Koresh, Jim Jones? How about some of those people who slam others through using biblical verses that are from ancient times and may have been rewritten 1,000 times by people, and they're still using that in order to practice judgment? You know, there are radical fringes in every group, and absolutely people become radicalized. And you know how? This guy, Ari Krugalansky at the University of Maryland, who is a psychologist that does research there, said there are 3 ingredients to being radicalized. The first is the universal need to live a worthwhile life, to have significance. The second is a narrative that gives someone permission for violence, such as they want honor or glory, or they have enemies that are real or imagined. And 3 is community, or a network of people who validate the narrative and the violence. For those of us who do not stand by our Black brothers and sisters and minimize the significance of the value of what they are trying to say, we are actually creating the radicalized fringes of that movement, because we are minimizing them and not honoring the history of this country, where they have been put in a position that they are marginalized. This is a group of humans that are children of God the same way that we are children of God. It's that simple. Okay, the word human comes from the Latin humanus, which is thought to be a hybrid relative of homo, meaning man and earth. We are all men and women on this earth in an equal way. And so, listen, you need to take a good look at where you stand spiritually with some of this, because, you know, we are taught as a spiritual group of humans that we have light, and our light is divine. And when we are slamming a group of people, a movement that's allowing a group of people to find some kind of balance and harmony and equalization, it is not spiritual at all. So this is my message from 2020, that we have to take the blinders off. By the way, Bill and I watched a great movie called Freed, state with Matthew McConaughey, which will, help you see some things that may take the blinders off. We need to take the blinders off. We need to have common sense spirituality. We need to look at how history repeats itself, both within our own lives, through our own karmic profile and what makes us tick inside, and through the collective consciousness. And those of us who are able to find that common sense spirituality and open our arms out and let the divine work through us has to pass it on to others. So I hope that you will take the blinders off. And there is a song, Find a Light Again, and in the words of a country singer, Thomas Rhett, in a world full of hate, be the light. In a place that needs change, make a difference. First morning musing of the year. Please sign up for Amanda Chavez, who is a psychotherapist, and myself doing spirituality and psychology together the third Thursdays of the month. And take a look at what we've got there for you on Zoom to teach. So I hope that you all had a healthy and happy holiday season, and look forward to doing all of your suggestions in the new year. Have a great day.